It's part 2 of lesson 6. So we've implemented some basic authentication using Microsoft's identity framework. And now we're going to move on to implementing authorization. So a little more complex, but not super complicated because, again, the identity framework does a lot of the heavy lifting for us. I'm imagining we probably should be able to finish around 1 o'clock today. I don't think we'll need a full 2 hours. I know people have been working hard on their assignment. We've got midterm next week, so we should be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish, hopefully in about the next hour. And you can start your weekend a little bit early, I would hope. Don't imagine you get lots of objection to that. So what we want to do now is configure things. We've got authentication working, but really we need that next level. We need authorization as well, because it shouldn't be that anybody can just register for an account and automatically be able to, modify the categories or pets in the pet store. It should be somebody in an administrator role only who has that capability. So a few changes we need to make. The first one is we need to go back to our startup file. So our startup file, it's already enabling user management for authentication, but it doesn't by default handle role management for authentication. So we're going to enable role management for authorization. User management for authentication enabled by default. So this add default identity, this means we can process logins, basically. So we're going to add in here, we want to add roles using the identity role class that's baked into the identity framework. So I'm just adding line 37. So when our application starts, not only can it manage users, but it can also now manage roles. So that was step 1, configure the site to manage roles for authorization. Step 2 is we need to go to our database and we need to manually create an administrator role and a customer role. If I look in my database right now in Management Studio, if I look at the Asp Net, delete it. So if I run a query, select star from Asp Net roles, you'll notice there's nothing here. So we're going to create a couple of roles that we can then use. So the code to do this is pretty simple, but just in the interest of time, I've actually put it up on Blackboard for you. So there's 3 insert statements here. Insert into Asp Net roles. So we're going to first create a role called administrator with an ID of 1. The IDs are not auto-assigned in this table for some reason. We're then going to create a second role called customer and give it an ID of 2. The third thing we're going to do is we're going to select the current admin account in Asp Net users, and we're going to make that user an administrator. We're going to put them in role ID 1 in the Asp Net user roles table. So if you are using my database, which I know some of you may be, please do not run this script. I will run it. We don't need to both run it. If you're using your own database, you can copy these 3 lines from Blackboard, and I'll show you how to execute them using Management Studio. So we'll copy those 3 SQL insert commands. In Management Studio, there's several ways to get to the query window. You can One option is just right-click your database and choose New Query. There's also a New Query button up here on the toolbar. They'll both take you to the same place, just opens an SQL tab. And make sure you've got your Positive Pets database selected here. So then you can just paste them in. So it's going to create the administrator account, create the administrator role, create a customer role, and then query the existing admin account, and it's going to make that person an administrator. So to run this, there's an execute button right here on the toolbar. You can just click execute. And that's going to run these 3 insert statements in the database. So it tells me each insert is completed. It says my query's executed successfully. So now I can check this. If I make a new query, again, I can check select star from Asp Net Rules. And now I can see that we've got both the administrator and the customer role created.
I have a question.
Yes.
I tried doing that, but it says invalid object name ASP Net Rules. So I clearly haven't added ASP Net Rules somewhere. Where?
So that would need to be created. You'll need to run the update database command to run this migration.
Okay.
So in your package manager console, just run update-database. That should build the tables for you.
Okay, thank you.
So I can see my roles, and then if I check my ASP.NET user roles.
Ooh, build failed.
So I can see that my one user account is in the role ID of 1, which is an administrator.
Oh, yeah.
If your build failed, you'll have to check the error message, which will give you some clue as to what's wrong.
Yes, I got authorized, it could not be found. An authorized attribute. So, I must be missing a using directive or an assembly reference.
Right. So you're missing. So when I added authorize here, I then had to use the code hint to accept this reference on line 5.
Oh, right. Microsoft ASP.NET Core dot
Authorization.
got it. Thank you.
So we're going to create a customer account in a minute. But before we do, we need to make a change to the pre-built code on our register form. Right now, when we fill out the register form and save, this will create a new user in ASP.NET Users. That's fine, we're going to leave that, but we want to add 1 line of code. We also want any new user to automatically be assigned to the role of customer. So we've got 1 administrator account in role ID 1. All our other users are going to be customers. So we're going to modify the code that lives behind our register form so that whenever somebody new registers, they automatically become a customer. And then we can start to implement authorization so administrators and customers can see and do different things in our site. So this page exists in our site, but we can't actually see it in the Solution Explorer. We go and look, there's no view here. We don't see that register view anywhere. So we need to first make it visible, and then we can modify it. And it's a little bit tricky. So if you go into open up the areas, we've left this folder alone. We haven't really looked at it before. Underneath areas, there's a subfolder called identity. So all of the code for the identity framework is in behind here. We don't actually see it right now, but we can make it visible. It's a little bit tricky. We can make it visible so that we can modify it. So I'm going to right click the areas identity folder. And I'm going to choose add. And I'll leave this up on my screen in case it takes you a minute to get here. I'm going to choose the option. It's the 5th option. It says new scaffolded item. So under areas and identity, you right click and you choose add new scaffolded item. So this will allow us to access the register form and the code so that we can make that small addition to it. Click that. And we're going to get this. We've got all kinds of different options of what we want to scaffold. I'm going to click on identity. So we're scaffolding. It adds code required for using .NET Core identity. So click identity over here on the left. And then you can click the add button. So what is this going to do? Visual Studio gives us a checklist of all of the views that come with the identity framework. We're only interested in the second last one, the register form. So I'm going to check off account /register. We want to take this page and we're going to make a change to it. And under the data context class, I'm going to click the drop down and choose our database connection class, our application DB context. Okay, so we're scaffolding a new identity item. We're checking account register and we're picking the data context. So we're taking our existing register form so we can make some changes to it. And then I'm going to click add. And the register page is now going to be visible for us in Solution Explorer so that we can make whatever changes that we need to it. We don't need to change a lot, just a little bit. So it opens up this text file, which we don't need. I'll just close that. And now if I come back to Solution Explorer, under Identity and Pages and Account, you can now see we've got the register view here. So we could now open it up. We could modify any of the HTML, or we could modify any of the C# code. So this file doesn't use a controller. So if I double click, here's the HTML. So we could change this if we wanted to. I think we're actually just going to leave the HTML alone. So where's the C# code? Notice you could actually expand. I get a little expand arrow. And underneath, there's a file called register.cshtml.cs. So this is the C#, the server-side code that lives behind the HTML file. So this isn't actually using a controller. There's a CS_HTML view, and there's a cshtml.cs file. This contains all of the code, the built-in code for registering a new user. So we could make change. So for example, the validation of the password. So here's where the minimum length is actually set to 6. If you wanted a longer password, you could just change this value from 6 to whatever number you wanted. But we'll just leave it alone for now. we're just going to scroll down here to the section, the method that starts on line 71. This is the Onpost method. So this is the code that gets executed when the user clicks the register button and submits the form. So it checks if the username and password are valid. And if they are, these two lines, this actually creates the new user account. So when line 78 executes, this actually sends that new user, it hashes their password and syncs that user to our database. So our new user account is created right here on line 78. And then we've got some logic. If the result was successful, if we were able to create a new user, there's code here that if we're sending an email confirmation, it would go here. We're not doing those things, but then what happens? We immediately sign the user in and redirect to the home page. So we're going to add a little bit of code right here before line 81 inside this if statement if our new user account creation worked. So in here, we're going to automatically add any new users to the role of customer. So we're going to use our user manager class that's already here. And we're going to call add to role async. And this takes two parameters, the user account and the role we want to put them in. So our user variable here on line 77, there's our new user account. We are adding them to the role of customer. So after we create them in ASP.NET users, we're also going to put this person in the ASP.NET user roles, and we're attaching them, we're making them a member of the customer group. Okay, so there's the code. And this goes inside of this if result succeeded if statement. So what this should allow us to do is now go and register a new account. And then we're going to go and check the database, and that user should be in the role ID number 2. They should be in the customer group. And any other accounts we make should be customers from now on. So we created that first administrator manually. We put them in the administrator role with just an SQL insert. But now our application will automatically handle the roles for all new registrations. So we're going to go and try this out. I'm going to stay logged in Firefox. I'm going to wind up using 3 browsers. Firefox will be my administrator. Chrome will now be my customer account. And then I can use Edge as an anonymous user. So let's see how this looks. So I'm going to create an account, customer@gc.ca. And again, I'm going to use the same password. So for simplicity, my password will still be test123 something. So I'm going to try and create that second account, and then we'll look in the database. Not only should the account get created, but this user should be a member of the customers group or customer role. I'm going to register. Now I'm signed in as a customer. As soon as I sign in, I'm authenticated. So now I can get to the categories and pets links. This is not ideal. We'll need to change this. But right now it's working the way we programmed it to. So now if I run my query again and check my ASP.NET user roles, this was our first user, our administrator, but now my customer account is in role ID 2. So this is the result we were looking for. We've now got 2 user accounts, each one belongs to a different role. Just for fun, I'll sign out and create a second customer account. Customer, and let's say customer 2. You don't really need a second customer account. So now I've got 2. And if I look in my database, and now I've got 1 administrator and 2 customers. So any other person who registers, automatically now they're a customer with this line of code that we've added to the registration page. So now we've created users that are in different roles. What other changes should we be making to the website now in order to make it work properly and securely? This is working now, but it's really not very secure. How come? What's wrong with the website as we've got it right now? We've got a form of broken access control. Right. Customer shouldn't even see these because thanks to Char, we've only got an authentication check here. So as long as I register and log in, I could go and start modifying things in the back end of the store. But we don't want that. So we've got an authentication check here and here. We've done this. We're checking authentication. We now need to modify those security checks for authorization. Being authenticated isn't enough. We need to check the role of who is logged in. So we're going to go back to our categories controller, and then we're going to implement the same authorization check in the pets controller as well. So on line 15, where we've got authorize, we're going to add roles equals. So we're now adding the role-based authorization. So the admin account can get in here, but our customer account cannot. So I'm adding in round brackets roles equal administrator to that authorize command. I'm going to try it out now. I'll need 3 browsers. So in Firefox, no problem. I can get to categories, I can add, I can delete, fine. But in Chrome, I'm logged in as a customer. It doesn't prompt me to log in because I've already logged in, but it says my access is denied. Right? I cannot get anywhere in categories because I don't have the right permissions. The only place I can get to is the details. because that allow anonymous is still in effect. We want to add the same code, though, to the pets, because when I'm logged in as a customer, I still have full access to add, edit, delete the pets, which I shouldn't. Right? So I'm going to open up the pets controller. And I'm going to add that same line of code above the controller declaration, which is on line 15. So I'll add authorize enrolled equal administrator. And the role names, they are case sensitive, by the way. If in the database your role has a capital A, then in our authentication checks, it has to be capital. So our roles, it uses the name attribute. Again, I'll need to reference, just like we did in the other controller, we'll need to reference our Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authorization library. So I'll add that reference here on line 6. So now the customers should also be prevented from accessing the pets, anything in the pets controller. So in my admin account, no problem. I can go anywhere. But now I get access denied as a customer. Okay, so we're using that authorization level to make sure that the access to the resources is appropriate to who our user is and what they are allowed to do. There's one more thing we're missing. Jordan, I think you pointed it out before the break. So what other change should we make again now? Again, thanks, Jordan, the navs. So the check we have right now says, as long as you're logged in, you get these links. And if I go to Edge, just open up Edge. Only thing better than two browsers is 3 browsers, right? So in Edge, when I'm anonymous, I don't see them. But here in Chrome, as soon as I log in, I get these links. But I shouldn't get them because I don't have access. So we're going to just modify the logic in our layout file that instead of just checking if the user is authenticated, we actually want to do an authorization check. We want to see what role are they in. And only an administrator role should see these links. Customers shouldn't see them. So go back to layout. And this little if statement we wrote before, last hour, on line 27, we're going to modify it. Instead of checking if our user is authenticated, which option should I pick from this little pop-up menu? The option we want is in here somewhere. Thank you, Jordan. If our user dot is in role, and then we just provide a string parameter, and it is case sensitive. So if our user is in the administrator role, then display these links. Otherwise, hide them. We don't care if the user is anonymous or the user is a customer. Anonymous user shouldn't see the links, customer shouldn't see the links, only administrators see them. So we're going to rewrite that if statement very simply. So now as an administrator, I see the links. As a customer, I no longer see them. I am logged in, but I don't see them. And obviously, as an anonymous user, I don't see them either. I'm just going to show you, so you don't just take my word for it, the case sensitivity. Let's say I use all lowercase here. But in my database, we can see that administrator has a capital A. Now, the links don't show for me as an administrator. They don't show anywhere for anybody. So when we are checking roles for authorization, those role names, they are case sensitive. Okay. Now, we're actually largely done with our security checking. So we haven't had to write a heck of a lot of code because the identity framework does an awful lot of this for us. So we're just going to add one more small thing today. We've controlled access to the categories and pets for our administrators, but now there's really nothing on the website for visitors or customers to do or see, is there? As an administrator, okay, great. I can manage the website, populate the store categories and the pets. But as a customer, I can't see or do anything. I can log in or out, but the point of this is it's a pet store. So what do I do? So in a few weeks, we're going to be building the sort of shopping experience. How do I browse, add to cart, see a cart page, pay? We're going to be doing those things in lessons 9 and 10. So we're a ways away. But we can just set up the controller that we're going to need for that. And we can give the customers or anonymous users at least a link so that they can start the shopping process. This is going to be fairly simple. It's the last thing we're going to do today. So we're going to make a new controller. It's not going to be a controller with views because it's not mapped to a specific table in the database. The shopping experience is kind of a custom part of the site we're going to build piece by piece. So in your controllers folder, we are going to add a controller. And just like the first controller we made back in lesson 2, we're going to make an MVC empty controller. So we're going to create the views one at a time. So pick an empty MVC controller. And we're going to call this one the shop controller. So it's not a direct mapping to a table the way our categories and products are. It's kind of a custom process. I want to call it shop controller because this way the URL will be domain/shop, which is a nice descriptive URL for our customers. So call it the shop controller and click add. And we get an index view, an index method that returns a view. So we're going to create this view, and then we want to put a link in the nav bar that's visible for everybody that says shop. So customers and people browsing the site have a way to get into the shopping portion of the website, which is, after all, the whole reason the site exists.
So we're going to add. So we're going to add a controller with views, or
no, we're adding an empty controller.
Okay.
And just call it shop controller. So we're going to make this index view the same way we've done many times before. I'm just going to right-click the method name and choose add view. And it's just going to be an empty view for now. Click add. And it wants to give it a name of index, which is fine. We can just click the add button. We don't have to change the name. Our method is called index on line 11. So our view will also be called index. We've done this before, nothing new. I'll take out the code that's here. I'll just put on a heading that says shop our store. So now I can try it out. If I just go to localhost/shop, it loads our empty view. So fairly simple so far. We did this way back in week 2. Build an empty controller, generate a view. Let's put a link in our navigation bar that all users can see, regardless of their role, regardless if they're logged in or anonymous. Everybody should be able to see a link that says shop that will bring them here. So in our layout, after the if statement that we wrote, I'll create one new li tag. I use the same classes of navlink and textlight. So our ASP controller is going to be shop. Our ASP action will be index. And our link will say shop. So nothing complicated here. This is just plain old HTML. List item with a link. So our administrators will see all 3 of these links, categories, pets, and shop, but customers and anonymous users, they're only going to see the shop link. So these are this is for managing the catalog for our administrator. Okay, so lines 36 to 38, there's our new link. So now as a customer, from our home page, I have a way to get to the main shopping page. So what should go on this page? When the user clicks on shop and gets to that sort of shopping entry page, what should we show them? What would somebody need to see here? Okay, yeah, we could show all the pets for sale. That would be one option. Ralph, we will do that, but I was sort of thinking we'll maybe make that the second page. We'll build that page a bit later. What might we want to show them before the pets? Because maybe we got 50,000 pets. So what could we do to maybe organize it before we get to the list of pets? Yeah, exactly. Why don't we show our categories? Let's show our categories. A user could click a category and then they would get the pets in that category. So we'll just build this page. So it will look something like this, but instead of using an HTML table with all these links, we're going to use a bootstrap like a card view. So we can have a big kind of box, maybe rows of 3, and then a user could click on a category. So we'll do that, and then we're going to call it a day. Okay. So I'm going to go to the shop controller. So what we'll want to do here is pass a list of categories. to the view so the user can select one. So we're going to need to use our category model. When we scaffolded this code, Visual Studio, it wrote the code for us to get the list of categories. So we're going to have to now write the code ourselves. So that we're going to have to add a few references and a few things. This is just an empty controller. In order to be able to use the database and use our category model, we're going to need to add a few things here. The first one is a DB connection instance. Our controller is going to need to use our database. If we look at the controllers we scaffolded, they've already got this. They've got a database connection here. And then they've got a constructor method that whenever this controller gets called, it also receives a database connection it can use. So we're going to need that in our controller. Private, read only, I'll call it context. Oops, sorry. So we want to use our database connection class, put it in a variable I'm going to call underscore context. This is going to prompt us for a reference. In order to use that database connection, it lives inside of the data folder. So we need to make a reference to our positivepets.data. So I'm going to accept that reference recommendation. Visual Studio adds a reference on line 2. So every time we use this class, we need a database connection. So we're going to take a database object in. Sorry. Make DB connection public in this class. So we can use it in any method. So all of the methods here, we're going to probably need the database for each one. Every part of the shopping process. Viewing a category, showing the pets in that category, showing a particular pet details, adding to cart, showing the shopping cart. These are all of the custom methods we'll be adding here in lessons 9 and 10. So we can use this shared database. We're going to need the database for all of them. So we'll just share this database object. So we'll say var categories. We use our database connection. We're going to fetch the list of categories in alphabetical order. And create that as a list. So we're going to query the database, use our categories DB set object. We're going to add some sorting by name. We'll convert that result to a list. And then when we load the index view, we want to say, here you go. Here's the category data you need to show the user. I know that was a fair bit of code. I will leave this up on my screen for a minute. We've only got one more step to finish this, which is to write the code in our index view so that we can display the categories and the user can click on one to shop. So So again, all of the code here from line 13 down to 19, this is so that our controller has a database connection it can use. When you scaffold the controllers, you get this code manually. If we're writing our own custom controllers, we have to add this code ourselves. So in a moment, we will go back to the index view and we'll add the code we need so that our shop page is not empty. It actually shows the categories and lets our shoppers click on one. So we're going to add a little code at the top of our index view. First thing we need is a model. What kind of data is this view going to get from the controller? Going to get a list of category objects. And we want to display all the categories, so our query in the controller, it's fetching the list of categories from the database. We can also set the page title. So this appears in the browser tab, which is good for SEO. I'll use Bootstrap to format the categories into cards. So I'm going to call each category, I'll represent it with C. So we're going to loop through our data model. And I'm going to create cards, 3 cards per row. And we're going to center them and make them 100 pixels tall. And finally in here, after all our Bootstrap, we're going to display the category names. Whoops, I think I need a semicolon here. Yes. So I'm going to try this out. We'll see how it looks. I think I need to build my site first because we created a new controller. I may have to restart the server. So now in my store, we get cards with our categories. At full scale, it's rows of 3, but it's mobile responsive. So if I shrink it, I may get 1, I may get 2, depending on the width of my device. And if we add new categories as an administrator, they will automatically show up in our store. Now I can't do anything with these yet. So I want these to also be links. It's the last change we're going to do for today. And I'll push all this up to GitHub in a minute. I'm going to wrap the category names inside an anchor tag. So our ASP controller will be shop. Our ASP action, we'll call it shop by category. Actually, I guess shop by category. And our ASP root ID, we're going to pass in the category ID. And then our link will be the category name. So not only are we displaying the category name, but it's now going to link. We'll build this method later. This doesn't exist right now. So the links aren't going to go anywhere yet. That's okay. So now we can see they've turned green. They're links. So when I click on one, it's calling this method that doesn't exist. That's okay. We'll build that later. And I have access to this as a customer who's logged in or as an anonymous user. That's fine. I should be allowed to shop anonymously. I'm going to have to register and log in to check out, but I should be able to shop the store, put items in my cart, even without logging in. Okay, so we will come back to this, not for a while. It's going to be 4 weeks before we come back to our shop controller. So next week is our midterm. Then we've got reading week. Then we're going to add the ability to log in with a social account, Google or Microsoft. That's going to be week 8. And in week 9, we're going to resume this shopping process. So we can click a category and see all the pets. We can add to cart. We can view our cart. We can remove from the cart. We can see our total and we can check out. That's going to be lessons 9 and 10. So we've got a ways to go with it. I'm going to push. So those are all the changes I wanted to make today. I will push everything up to GitHub. So we did authorization and the starting of the shop. Okay, so everything is up on GitHub for you now. Does anybody have questions about anything before we go for today?
I keep getting errors. There is this error on line 8 for some reason.
Okay, we can maybe look at that after in terms of debugging. Are there actual questions? Is there anything in terms of sort of explanation we've done today that you'd like to look at again that maybe is fuzzy?
Can I go ahead?
Sure, Ralph. What's your question?
Yes, my question is not about the class today, it's about the assignment we just done in.
Okay.
Do you want us to keep the link on to the live server or we turn it off for now?
If you could keep it on, because I will try to mark them over the next few days. As soon as I'm done marking them, I will email the class and you can then stop the web server as soon as that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. Excellent question. Any other questions? Anything specifically? Well, I mean, the main things would be the basics of the MVC pattern and how the files interact with one another. How we connect and interact with the database. So that would be things like the connection string in app settings.json and using database migrations, as well as how to create your own controllers and views, and then some of the basics that we did today around authentication and authorization. I mean, so those are the fundamental concepts: MVC pattern, database interaction, basic security using ASP.NET Identity. Those would be sort of, I think, the three core components of what we've done so far. Oh, thank you, Jordan. Yes. Okay, let me just do that quickly. I'm just going to